I thought I would change gears a little bit and make a video on two of my upcoming restoration projects. These have been several years in the making. If you followed my channel for basically since the beginning, so about 6 or 7 years now, you may remember seeing these tractors in some of my old videos. Back in about 2013 or so, these tractors were in a different location and they looked very different than they do now. But I figured I would make a video on them since I'm finally putting some time and effort into them. With my grandfather's health going downhill over the past year, I've finally found the motivation to start working on these two machines. These were two of my grandfather's biggest workhorses on the farm, and when he sold the farm about 15 years ago, these were the only two pieces of equipment he kept, because they meant a lot to him. And both of these tractors have a lot of sentimental value to my family. These were the tractors, these were basically the main money makers on the farm. My grandfather used to be a very big row crop vegetable farmer here in South Jersey. Back in the day, he grew a lot of tomatoes and peppers and squash and things like that, and these were his two main workhorses. So when he sold the farm, it was very hard for him to let go of them. Ever since I was a little kid, my grandfather's been saying he wanted to, how he wants to restore these two tractors that used to be his main workers on the farm. They have a lot of sentimental value to him, and he used to say, oh yeah, someday, you know, we'll get these tractors fixed up and I'll take you for a ride. Well, with his health going downhill, I mean, obviously he hasn't been in any shape to, you know, work on them himself. And I've been doing lots of research the past couple years because I've been, you know, I haven't forgotten his words. I've wanted to restore these tractors as well, because they're family heirloom tractors. And I figure, you know, I don't want to wait any longer, so I want to, you know, start at least researching and looking into what it takes to restore these couple tractors here. So for those of you who don't remember these tractors, I'll give you a little overview of them. This is a 1954 John Deere 60 vegetable tractor, and the one behind it is a 1969 Ford 4000 diesel. It's also kind of set up as a vegetable tractor, but it's more of a utility tractor than anything. But these were the two tractors that were my grandfather's most reliable workhorses, and he was very hesitant to sell them when he sold off the rest of the farm equipment. My grandfather quit farming in 1985, and at that point, most of his equipment was worn out, so a lot of it was just left to sit on the farm and rot away. He sold off everything else, but he didn't want to sell the 60 or the 4000 because he had hopes of restoring them. Both of these tractors sat on the farm for about, I don't know, maybe 15 years or so. And once he sold the farm, he towed the two tractors up here to my uncle's farm just around the corner. And he actually towed them into the back 40, which is way down in the back there. And they sat there for a good couple years. And if you've seen the videos I made years and years ago on these two tractors, that's where they were sitting. So they sat there for probably a good 10 years or so. And then probably 2 or 3 years ago, my uncle started cleaning up down in the back there, you know, clearing some land, and he decided to move the two tractors up here. So at least now they're a little bit closer to humanity. The bugs are getting me pretty bad out here, and it's 85 degrees out, so I have to try and make this video before my phone overheats. But anyway, I'll start by giving you an overview of the 60 and a little history. So this tractor was built May 24th, 1954 out in Waterloo, Iowa, and it was shipped to the Baltimore, Maryland warehouse, and then it was sent up to a dealer here in New Jersey, about 10 miles down the road from where we live now. So this tractor actually hasn't traveled too far from where it was sold. What's interesting about this 60 is it was actually used as a dealer demonstrator for a couple years. So it had a lot of unusual options installed at the dealership. They weren't installed at the factory, but at the dealership instead, including the orchard style underslung exhaust, which would have come off the manifold here and looped down and gone under the tractor. I think a lot of dealer demonstrators were set up like that because the orchard muffler was a lot quieter. And it also had a single front wheel, and it has the extra long cultivating rear axles with the F1478R dished offset rear wheels, which from what I've been told are pretty hard to find, especially, you know, not cracked or broken. So this tractor actually does have a couple of uncommon options on it, which make it worth a little bit more, which is kind of cool. Here in New Jersey, we grow a lot of row crops, and my grandfather grew a lot of tomatoes and peppers and squash and things like that. So most of his tractors were set up for row crop work. They were set up for high clearance crops, crop beds. So that's why this has the special cultivating axles and wheels, and that's why I had the single front wheel originally. You don't see a lot of tractors with that setup, but here in New Jersey and out in California they're pretty common. So this tractor was used as a demonstrator at the dealer for about 2 years, and then my grandfather bought it in 1956. He actually traded in his very first tractor, which was a 51 John Deere A that was set up pretty similarly with the single front wheel and the long axles and all that. Like I said, most of his tractors were set up for vegetable work, so he traded the A in on the 60, and for the first couple of years he owned it, this was the main workhorse on the farm. This did most of the jobs around the place before he started buying bigger tractors. At some point in the early 60s, he switched out the single front wheel for the round tube wide front axle that you see here, and he used it for cultivating up until that point. You can't, at least in my opinion, you really shouldn't cultivate with a wide front axle. But he used the tractor for cultivating, plowing, planting, disking, pretty much anything you can imagine. All three of my uncles have fond memories driving this tractor when they were growing up. My oldest uncle used to drive this tractor when he was 3 or 4 years old through the field. Towards the end of the picking season, when they would, go down the rows and pick up all the baskets of tomatoes or peppers, because back then that's how they used to do it. They used to, pull wagons with the tractor, and my uncle would be up on the seat, and my grandfather would tell him, okay, move forward, and he'd, push the clutch in, go a couple feet, then he'd say stop, and my uncle would pull the clutch back and, bring the tractor to a stop. For a 3-year-old, I mean, the instructions don't get much simpler than that. That's the nice thing about having a tractor with a hand clutch, is it's pretty simple to drive. So, like I said, all three of my uncles have memories driving this thing, especially from a young age, so that's why it has some sentimental value to us. This engine was overhauled in 1971 after it cracked the block, so they had a replacement block installed. Like I said, this tractor got ran pretty hard, and it has, from what I can gather, it has at least 10,000 hours on it. This thing was just used constantly. So like I said, it had a new block put in 1971, had the valves ground. It's had the generator and starter rebuilt a couple different times, and it's had the carburetor rebuilt at least once. This tractor, unfortunately, spent its whole life outside. I don't think it's ever spent a night inside since it was new, because my grandfather just didn't have the storage. All of his equipment sat outside, so this tractor's been subject to the elements for 60 years. I want to restore this tractor for my grandfather, and I don't know how long it'll take me to get both of these tractors restored. It may take me 10 years, I don't know, but I figured rather than letting them sit back here and rot any further into the ground, I would at least start wrenching on them while I had some time, and before I go back to school. So a couple weeks ago I started tearing into the 60, as you can see here. I didn't get too far into it, but I just started tearing the sheet metal off. The nose cone was practically hanging off the front because the bolt holes had all rusted out. So I just pulled the nose cone off, and then with that I took out the steering column, the hood and fuel tank, and the dash. So that all came apart fairly easy. I was kind of surprised considering these bolts have been in there, rusted together for so many years. So I started, tearing into it, and unfortunately, as you can see here, I have it covered up now, but unfortunately, the up pipe from the exhaust manifold to the muffler went missing at some point in the past, and it sat on the farm, and it sat out here in the back field for all those years with nothing covering the exhaust manifold. So, I mean, without a doubt, water got down in there, so the engine is more than likely seized up. I was kind of disappointed to find that out, but that's not all hope is lost. So I figured I would start working on getting the engine unstuck. So a couple weeks ago, I bought about 9 gallons of diesel fuel and a gallon of PB Blaster. I mixed them all together. I took the spark plugs out, and I poured the mixture down into each cylinder until it poured out. And I also took off the crankcase fill cap and the transmission fill cap, and I filled those all the way up with the mixture. And what that'll do is over time it'll penetrate, and it'll work its way into all the little nooks and crannies inside the crankcase, and it'll work to loosen everything up, because without a doubt everything is rusted together inside there. So I did that a couple weeks ago, and I figure I'll let it soak for a couple months and try and loosen everything up, and then I'll come back in the fall or the winter time when I have time off from school, and I'll we'll pull it out of here, bring it up in front of the barn there so it's a little bit more accessible, and what I'd like to do is either wrap a chain around the clutch pulley here or put a big wrench on the flywheel. You can see I have the flywheel cover off. What I'll probably end up doing is just building a wrench and sticking it on the flywheel and then trying to rock the flywheel back and forth to break it loose. And then we'll drain all the fluid out of the crankcase. So right now I'm just letting the crankcase soak. Give it a good few months. That should be enough time to loosen it up. So I figured that would be a good place to start. Unfortunately, this 60 is missing a lot of parts, just from years of neglect. A lot of parts have rusted and broken off, and I'm sure we've had one or two people come back here and steal parts off of it over time. So it is missing a few important parts, namely the battery box and seat and the exhaust pipe, like I was telling you earlier. That's been gone for as long as I can remember. So this tractor does need some attention. I may end up having to buy a whole nother 60 or 620 to use as a parts tractor for this thing. But when I finally do get the time and money to really tear into it, I want to do a full nut and bolt restoration and give this tractor the attention it needs. I plan to tear it apart, replace every nut and bolt, every gasket, every seal, every bearing, basically anything that it will need. I want to make this like a new tractor because it's more than paid for itself and earned its keep, and it was my grandfather's baby. So in due time it will get that restoration. I've just been tearing it apart to see what it needs, see what's missing, and see what kind of farmer modifications I need to undo. So that's what the 60 looks like right now. I really just have the sheet metal taken off of it. I really can't tear too much further into it at the moment, at least until I get it inside. But pretty soon my uncle and I are going to pull it out from back here, and we're going to put it in front of the barn so it's a little bit more accessible and easier to work on. So that'll be coming in the next couple of weeks. And now we'll switch over to the 4000 here. This is the other workhorse. So my grandfather bought this tractor brand new in 1969, and it came from a Ford dealership just down the road from us here, a couple miles. The dealership is closed up now, but we were good friends with the owners, and they treated us real well. So this tractor hasn't gone very far from where it was sold either. So that's kind of cool. I think it may even have the original dealer sticker on it somewhere. I just have to find it. But this was the other workhorse. This has the old Ford 3-cylinder diesel, which is pretty much a bulletproof engine. These are very hard to kill. My uncle has 3 Ford loader tractors with that same engine, and you just can't kill them. They're torque monsters. This tractor actually saw more abuse than the 60. My grandfather told me this tractor has well over 10,000 hours on it. And at some point in the 70s, they actually rebuilt the engine because the hours, they just put so many hours on it and it was getting tired. So it's already been overhauled once, and they've worn out and replaced a lot of parts on this tractor. The front wheels are not original. I think these are off of a John Deere. But this tractor was used for everything. They used to do the same work with it that they did with the 60. So they did a lot of plowing and disking and planting and things like that. They did bush hogging with it. At one point they even had a cab on it, and they used a forklift on the front of it too for loading baskets onto trucks. So the front end saw a lot of wear and tear. Without a doubt the front end needs to be rebuilt. So that'll be another project by itself when I finally get to restoring this tractor. But these little Ford diesel tractors are pretty much bulletproof. They are very hard to kill. This tractor was last run around 1992, so it hasn't been sitting quite as long as the 60, but it's definitely seen a lot more wear and tear throughout its lifetime. It's got the 3-point hitch rear PTO. It's got power adjustable rear wheels, as you can see, and it has a small fortune in wheel weights installed too. So I haven't seen too many 4000s with this wheel set up here, so I thought that was kind of neat. It's got power steering. It's got the whole deal. The tires are actually in pretty good shape too. I'm kind of surprised. The other one holds air, this one doesn't, but they're not dry rotted or cracked too bad, at least not compared to the tires on the 60. But I was actually going to start working on this tractor first because I figured it would be simpler, but the 60 means a little bit more to me. You just don't see, in this part of the country, you don't see a whole lot of 2-cylinders around anymore. You see plenty of these little Fords though. There were a lot of Ford tractors sold around here, so these 4000s are pretty common. But this will be, this will come after the 60, hopefully. So the 4000 doesn't have quite as much of a story behind it compared to the 60, but this tractor is a few years newer, and this one's also lived a hard life. But it was reliable. I mean, everybody in the family tells me about how tough this tractor was back when it was running. And we actually still have a few of the attachments for it too. The forklift is sitting over there in the lineup. But this tractor did pretty much everything you can think of. Once the after the 60 was retired to pulling wagons and just doing tillage. So there you have it. That's just a little bit of history on both of these tractors. These were my grandfather's 2 workhorses, and like I said, I'm planning to work on them piece by piece over the next couple years, starting with the 60. It's been a goal of mine for many years to restore this tractor, and I feel like it's my duty to do that since my grandfather's not in any physical shape to help me work on it anymore. So hopefully I can get it moved inside somewhere pretty soon, get it put inside somebody's shop, and I can start really tearing into it at some point. But this is going to be my priority for the next couple of years. I'm not, especially with school and everything, I'm planning to, kind of slow down the garden tractor collecting. Right now, it's just not doing me any good having so many garden tractors sitting around, so I'm trying to thin out the herd a little bit, and I'm going to make the 60 the priority now that I've got, a lot of resources and a lot of people who are willing to help me out. So, I don't know how long it's going to take me to get these tractors restored, but it should make a great video series. So I figured I would just give you guys a short overview of these tractors and let you know what it's going to entail. So I'll let the crankcase in the 60 soak for a couple months, and then I'll come back in the fall or the winter time and try and break it loose, and maybe at that point I'll have it moved up to the front there in front of the barn, and I can make another video on it for you guys, so you'll have that to look forward to. So anyway, thanks for watching, guys. If you like this video, please comment, rate, and subscribe, and stay tuned for more tractor and truck content. Thanks for watching.